Greetings. This is Professor Mark Gura. Welcome to my class where my students and I shine a light on education and bring it into sharp focus. Our goal is high quality teaching and learning, something we stretch for through facing unvarnished truths and seeking practical insights. What follows is a conversation I had in class with Dr. Rose Reissman, instructional coach and curriculum expert. She's a frequent contributor to my class. Rose is the founder of the Writing Institute, one of many programs she's established or been deeply involved in to elevate required curriculum to the level of highly engaging, deeply meaningful, and inspiring learning experience. Welcome back to my class, Rose. Here we go. So, Dr. Rose Reissman, welcome to Professor Gura's class.
It's a pleasure to be here and to be part of this ongoing learning and teaching community.
What I want to talk about today is bringing Blockbuster films to school, which you feel is a teachable opportunity for literacy and more.
Schools are familiar with Blockbuster films because usually before winter break or spring break or even before the end of school, schools go off on excursions. They get kids into buses and take them to films. Then they get back and the kids calm down from the day and that's it. And some schools also screen Blockbuster films for rainy days, snowy days, when teachers are out, so the kids sit in the auditorium and they watch them. But my idea is, why not tap into the Blockbuster films and actually use them as teachable moments? Ironically, they're blockbuster films because they talk about general themes just as great books do and as great social studies topics do. General themes like love, survival, friendship, peace, humanity.
I was a teacher as well. I taught in middle schools in New York City, and from time to time, yes, we would use movies, but you're quite correct. We offered the kids the movies as a treat, as a reward, something to do on a snow day. The connection we didn't really make was that this could really be mainstream instructional resource. That's the crux of your idea, which I think is a fantastic idea.
Well, it's not just an idea, it's an easily adaptable practice, no cost, free online. I believe it connects to multiple curricula, topics, themes, skills, and life lessons every teacher is imparting already. And I'm not suggesting that it become, as it is in high school, there are media studies or whatever, or in college. I'm suggesting that the teacher take 1 to 2 periods or 3 at most and use this and then connect it back to the curricula, skills, life lessons that are the theme of the school topics already.
And that's a powerful idea. But I'm going to stop for just a minute because I want to get at, so who is this Dr. Rose Reissman to have powerful ideas? I know you are a full-time instructional coach in a middle school in New York City, in Brooklyn. Taking this probe just a bit further, these aren't just ideas, these are practices that over the years you've honed and you actually bring into the learning culture, the teaching and learning culture of this school over and over again.
I'm a lifelong reader and a lifelong moviegoer and media consumer from childhood. And I have mostly taught Title I schools in a varied career that ranges from elementary to middle school, some high school work, curriculum writing, workshop leading across the country. And I have field tested these projects. My role at DITMUS is to support in terms of literacy, instruction, project-based learning, integrating literacy into not only ELA, but social studies. I've also done a great deal with ESL learners, special needs, and all learners across the school. So I collaborate with teachers to help them achieve their specific curricula, skills, topic and theme objectives, and I love doing it.
You've been at this for a good long while. You've seen a raft of what people hope would work or think works, and then you have your own ideas. We're talking at this moment about a powerful idea, taking popular movies, generally from big studios, major productions, and they've had teams of writers and directors. They come out as masterpieces. No wonder these things are classroom friendly.
Well, I go further than classroom friendly. The child comes in, the student at any level comes in, they already know this. This is part, any student, even a student who doesn't go to movies, they've been bombarded by ads, by merchandising, etc. They know who the characters are. They know at some level. So why not talk about it with them? That's how we get them involved in learning. Why not use what they know, the capital, the social capital, personal capital they bring to the classroom, and capitalize on it for curricula and for life lessons, because that's really why these blockbusters appeal, in my opinion.
What I find interesting is that some of these movies are adaptations for the movie audience of what are clearly works of literacy. In other words, they're books that would be taught anyhow. We name a few of them.
No problem. So today we are going to be talking about Wicked. And the Wicked of 2024 is grounded somewhere in a 1900 book, 1900, 125 years old, created by Frank L. Baum, and also grounded in 1995. So 95 years after that, Greg McGuire went out and he looked at the characters and said, wait, those two witches knew each other as friends. Let me tell the story of the Wicked Witch of the West becoming wicked. And that made McGuire, is still making him money. And so there's two books in that one. And then, of course, we have all of the Spider-Verse, which is graphic narratives that were created in the 1930s and 2011 and made money and suddenly became Spider-Man 1, 2, now 4 is being shot, and Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse is a book that was created by Jason Reynolds, current literary lion of the young adult literature. Percy Jackson and Lightning Thief, not one of my favorite books, but certainly a big favorite. That book has generated several different films, and it's also generated a new TV version, which is really wonderful. So I could go on and on.
But I want to reiterate that many of these blockbuster films actually are adaptations to film of classic or important print works. People may not be familiar with the actual title of it. They may refer to it as The Wizard of Oz, but that came from a classic young adult work, which is required in school in many places. Also, it's been for some time now, graphic novels, graphic works of literature are required, and there's nothing more iconic than the Marvel comic Spider-Man. We're on very firm ground using those films because they're directly and strongly connected to required print works anyhow. And if you've got a couple of other examples, sure.
Well, Mary Poppins, as we mentioned before, Mary Poppins P.L. Travers wrote that book, and she did not really like the Disney version, which made her character prettier, sweeter, etc., with music, which she couldn't stand. But she wrote that in the 1900s, and in 1968, Disney bought it from her, rewrote it, put in those the two songwriters, but certainly Mary Poppins, all of her books. Also, what should be mentioned, Mark, is that because of the blockbusters, people return to reading. Once the movie comes out, the book gets sales. They slap a movie cover on the book that goes out in paperback, so that this is a circle. Students who see the movies then want to read all the iterations, which we mentioned. Some of the blockbusters like Moana do not come from books, but guess what? The Blockbuster company, it makes certain to help the teachers' teaching curriculum by coming out with novelizations, meaning they get a good writer who looks at the movie and writes a novel or a young adult book or a stepping up literacy phonics primer, etc. So it's all focused on reading. It's a circle back and forth. The public also goes back and buys the books afterwards. I myself have seen a movie and then bought a book that it was based on.
That's a great point and something I wasn't aware of, that if we're talking about a blockbuster film that isn't an adaptation, the reverse happens. A print work will be produced afterwards because now there's interest in this story and these characters. And so kids who likely wouldn't read print books may start to dabble in this habit we've had for a long time of reading, but maybe with a little goosing from an astute teacher. Let's talk about, how do you pronounce it? Moana.
Yeah.
One bit of confidence that the Disney studio has instilled in me is that anything they put out is crafted very well. In other words, they have a team of writers, and those people know the elements of storytelling, elements that we could trace back to Greek classics, Shakespeare, that sort of thing, the classic characters, classic genres, comedies, tragedies, and on and on. So even though this may be the latest iteration by Disney, it's based on classic literature and storytelling. Take it away, Dr. Rose.
So, to be honest, there are many blockbusters that come out that don't necessarily appeal to me. However, seeing it with an audience, and that's also an important thing. We want our students to be members of a community, and there's a media community, an audience, and that builds community. Moana is an animation that focuses on a young girl living in Polynesia who is challenged with being herself, finding herself. One of the themes of all juvenile literature for younger children and young adult literature for older ones is finding yourself. So sorting out your cultural identity, your divided heart. Who are you? You're your parents' child, your family's child, your culture's child, and you want to go on adventures. And Moana beautifully expresses, and storytelling. Remember, Disney was a storyteller. Mickey, all of his characters, he was an astute storyteller and a great writer. That's called digital storytelling. And let's focus on storytelling. That's what it is, a medium of. This is a story of a little girl who's the child of a chief, and she has a certain destiny, but she goes beyond the role of what a female is supposed to do in her society, very appealing, and she wants to leave the island. She wants to go somewhere else other than she's supposed to, but yet she also wants to stay. So this is poised on all of the themes, connecting back to school, all of the themes, rites of passage, who am I, cultural response, responsiveness, cultural ID, social studies. I'm in an island, someone is attacking me. What do I do? Can kids lead? Can they not? Through the music and the storytelling, I found that the songs and the things in it, they are poised. Disney is knocking in and reiterating and resonating all of these themes that ELA teachers, social studies teachers, student leadership, community teachers, our guidance counselors, all of what we're teaching, culture and health and geography, it's all there in Moana.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you make about the songs, because Disney turns these stories, these dramatic stories with classic dramatic elements and some comic relief too. There's always some funny little character that pops up when you need some comic relief. These become musicals in the way that Broadway musicals wish they could be, because it's done and edited. It's perfect. And interested parties, now that could be a teacher in a class, can get the lyrics in a variety of formats, and those lyrics augment the storytelling and recapitulate aspects of the story, and it's a very rich experience. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit. Okay, clearly, as you've explained so far, this is something you could do. This is something you could do for good effect if you are teaching ELA or perhaps social studies with a bit of a literacy slant to it, or maybe some other things.
Leadership, student leadership, community projects, the sense that youth can change the world. Most of these movies are about that. If you look at it carefully, the protagonist is a young person, Harry Potter or whatever, but they can save the world or change the world.
Wonderful themes for youngsters to be wrestling with. So let me get back to my impertinent question, which is, clearly you've laid the groundwork for this is something you could do, a legitimate thing to do with value, potential. But why is this a great thing to do instead of just putting print books in the hands of kids?
So in your impertinent lies the pertinent, Professor Gura. So number one, it's a best practice because we're teaching a range, whether you're teaching in a Title I school in the inner city or you're teaching in a school in rural or suburban North Carolina, you have a range of learners. You don't only have print learners. You have learners who have ADHD, dyslexic learners, dyscalculate. You have this whole generation of the pandemic who miss certain skills, etc. By using movies, it's a best practice because, wow, this is all accessible. Wow, you got the movie. What's even more wonderful is that now Disney has come out with excerpts, which are total songs, and which I discovered the last few months have the words sing-along. So it's like a karaoke, and we're teaching science of reading and everything. But if you're watching the movie and if you see the words and it's moving along, suddenly everything comes together. So what best practice is that it goes across the spectrum of learners, linguistic, cultural backgrounds. Disney has been smart enough to release sing-alongs, which are in Spanish and in other languages, and little compilations of their movies where the characters sing familiar songs in various languages. ESL teachers, wow, and others.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because occasionally Disney or some other studio actually gets, maybe it's luck or maybe it's calculated marketing, but these songs from the Blockbuster film become hits that kids will, I won't even say radio, they will get it through Spotify or other streaming services, and they're probably initially unaware of where these songs come from. And what a revelation the teacher gets to show them. This comes from an adaptation of a book. And so I think that's an interesting little slant on this.
Also, the vocabulary we're all teaching in every subject, Mark. Science, there's STEM words, as you know, mathematics, it's all about vocabulary. These songs emphasize, so the tough vocabulary that the students aren't familiar with, these songs are really on a higher vocabulary level, such as Do You Have a Chewy, that song that Dwayne Johnson is singing in Moana. Well, it has very good vocabulary in it, and in the sing-along, you can use it. And the students are going to get motivated. It also has a rap beat. So the vocabulary in popular is revolting. There are many multisyllabic words that the students don't use, but darn well they'll learn it if it's in the song, and they'll now see, maybe they'll even use it and apply it elsewhere. So I think that's something that people don't look at, teachers. And I hope that this podcast certainly will be the beginning in articles that teachers will take a look at this. This is right there.
Yeah, this is right there. Good to go. As you keep pointing out in our discussions, much of it is free. And if it's not free, it's economical. I mean, to screen a single account copy of a film for an entire series of classes, it's inexpensive. And as a worst case scenario, it's inexpensive. And there's all of these ancillary items that are absolutely free. So let's talk about some of the practicalities here. You know, I was saying before, yeah, even when I was a middle school teacher in inner city New York City a million years ago, on occasion, we would show popular films to kids, but it's because we're now in this hyper digital environment, it's so much easier. Classrooms are equipped with large-scale digital displays, either screen-based or whiteboard-based or projector-based. Any connected device, an inexpensive laptop, can access this for the teacher, so there's no issue there. And so it's there for you. And you were saying something about how many classroom periods you recommend be devoted to this sort of thing. Why don't you elaborate on that?
Number one, the way it stands now, I'm sure that the audience listening to us who teach in any sort of school, public, parochial, suburban, rural, urban, etc., the teachers who teach in any of these schools have some point where the kids either get a trip or they're given a trip or the thing arrives. So my advice is don't let them just go in cold. Just as you would teach if you have a topic and you're taking them to a museum to augment your curricula, or you're taking them somewhere, do a pre-thing. What should they be looking for? What Easter eggs? You know, all these movies have Easter eggs, meaning little clues that refer back to the book, to another version of it, etc. Have them check it out. Prime them up. That's one period. Then take them to the movie. And then when they get back, don't just let them space out afterwards because they can't be taught after the trip. They're too tired. Have them sit down and write about what they saw. Do they want to be popular? Do they have a destiny like Moana? What is it that they want to do? How do they relate to the film? Is this just an entertaining film, or does it make some connection? So it's about 3 periods. They love it. Now, we did mention, Mark, something else, and this is important. Because of our technology available now, I like to do things with posters. Every kid can recognize the poster. What message is the poster telling us? What's actually happening in that poster? Well, in the Wicked poster, there's a whisper going on. There's those two witches, and you can show them this. In other words, you don't have to talk about it or get some poster that you managed to buy or you got at the movie theater. You go online and you look under posters, and you can make, in one of my articles, there's a whole list of all the poster iterations of Wicked. And Wicked also was The Wiz, by the way, which was an African-American in the city focused version of it. And that had a movie too. So you can look at the different posters and do a picture literacy thing from the posters. That could be a period, depending on you and what's happening, what colorations, which characters. Wizard of Oz, the original book and movie, the book had just a picture. Denslow was the illustrator for the book in 1900, had a picture of a lion, and it was about the wonderful land of the Wizard of Oz. The poster, though, for the 1939 movie had Judy Garland and other stars, because that was who it was about. It was about Dorothy. The Wiz poster had the deceased Michael Jackson and Diana Ross, because that was what it was about. This Wicked poster has those two figures with the green, obviously Cynthia and Ariana, but there's something about it, the expression and the color. And the kids can be looking at that on their devices. The teacher curates or just goes and looks on the posters and gives them a whole selection.
Great point. Yes. So there are all of these ancillary materials, and the teacher simply needs to curate, aggregate a list of links, maybe with a little annotation, and the kids can go and call these up from their device, either individually or small groups or whatever.
There's one more small point I want to mention. When I went to school, my career opportunities, I knew I was going to become a teacher. I also realized I was a writer. I was very concerned, as maybe you were, with getting a full-time paying job that could support myself and make my visions come true. I use this also, teaching these blockbusters, to show kids the number of roles and possible careers they can go forward to do. And there are all these credits. We've got the illustrators, the set designers. The kids are looking now and they see the credits of the movie. Sometimes I just run that, and they can see all the fields which have literacy at a core, which have social studies as a core, but all the fields and things that maybe, and look at all these careers, and team-based. Also the concept, these people are working creative teams. All of these blockbusters, the huge, and so this can be, as the kids work in a team on a project-based learning, on an inquiry using the digital, this might open up a future career. Maybe they don't have to go into something where they're going to work. Maybe they can become like Nicholas K. Smith, who worked on Wakanda. Maybe they can become a writer and a set builder and a designer, etc.
Okay, that's just another wonderful possible connection. And I'm going to switch hats again to ask another impertinent question. I'm going to get into the character of a highly unimaginative, a bit of a hard-ass instructional supervisor who has a big eye towards, is this teacher following what's officially expected? I'm asking you, what does studying or maybe making a poster have to do with required literacy learning?
I would advise all teachers who are going to adapt this approach, and I hope there will be many, take a look at your curricula. All of these curricula have objective skills and theme goals. I'm talking about social studies, science, literacy, ESL for sure. So among those goals, visual documents now, and being able to explain in sentences with reference to details, interpret, explain the messages communicated by visual documents is definitely a huge thing in social studies and in science, and explicating it is a major skill. So using a poster, Wicked is also about government. It's about politics. It's about the rights of protest, expression, etc. So in making a poster and then explaining what message you were communicating and how color, placement, composition, how it communicated that tone and message, you're doing that skill. Well, Mr. Supervisor, this is something that the kids knew. It was universal. And lo and behold, I'm able to differentiate. And Mr. Administrator is very interesting. That's one of the things you're being graded on is, are you differentiating these key skills for the students? But the teacher has to speak up and look at the interest you can observe and look at the products and look at my students' writing in which they are connecting and using the keywords and producing the products that the curricula mandates.
Waving the white flag.
Teacher has to speak up.
This will be another for another day. But yes, teachers are going to have to start advocating for what they believe in, rich, high quality instruction. So while I'm on a roll here, I'm really going to play devil's advocate. What are we doing in this crazy world where even an ELA teacher can easily get a streamed digital version of a Blockbuster film? Aren't we supposed to be teaching books? While we're at it, why in this day and age where most adults would rather go to the cinema
or watch
Netflix, why are we teaching books? And could it possibly be that the definition of what is a book is not necessarily strictly a hard copy thing?
So I love this question. And honestly, I'm a good example of why this question exists, and that the answer is the meaning of books, despite the fact that, because you mentioned age before, and yes, I'm a proud person who grew up going through a book and touching the pages and loving the magazine design and all of that. But I also recognize now that my brother, who spends hours traveling, and another dear friend of mine who's the head of a social studies group who listen to Audible books, they're grasping the same idea and they're hearing the words of it. And that is a way to learn books now. There are various platforms. I think that there's a place for everything. And I think that these movies, it becomes synergistic. I see the movie and I find out it's based on a book, and gee, I want to read the book. And then I read the book and then I think in terms of a movie, oh, what would this character do? And that's what people are doing in our world now. I don't think it's that print is going out. Print is there. It's one of the options, and it's storytelling. Stories, before there was print, right? There was oral storytelling. That's how it started. People went around, Hans Christian Andersen and the Grimm brothers, they went around telling stories, and then somebody wrote it down, and then somebody printed it. But it all begins with the story, and I think that the story is still there. And also, it's widening. The whole approach of a literacy teacher is supposed to be, beyond standardized tests, creating the circle of readers and writers lifelong. Disney isn't a part of that circle. If John Chu isn't a part of that circle, then I don't know what's wrong with the world. It is a circle. It's a circle of stories. And as long as we communicate stories through multiple platforms, and every curriculum standard has a standard which is reading and writing across the multiple platforms. So, gee, this is part of the standards now. All of the standards people recognize that, as does ISTE, of course.
So we're actually advocating that the way kids learn in school should mirror their experience out in the real world.
In the real world, this is also a work skill. Currently, you have to know how to be able to use digital resources, and you're being tested for it. This is what literacy has become. We're preparing them for the real world. I've always found that after I teach something, students want to go get the book or the full book and find out more.
even if it's just to satisfy their curiosity. Yes, Dr. Rose is right. This really does come from one of those things. It's called a book. I mentioned before that you often talk about free ancillary items. So I'd like to throw in a few examples. Maybe you can tick off a few freebies that, well, let's talk about what's available from the works you cited. You cited Mary Poppins. What might a teacher discover out on the web that's free that would be useful in teaching that book?
Okay, so in teaching any book, you're going to find if has been a media version of it. Mary Poppins has two major media versions, as we know. There are also posters and illustrations, the original illustrations for P.L. Travers' book. You're going to find all that free. And you just, if you want to know there was a Mary Poppins 2018, you type that in, you get the official trailer. Sometimes there's a second trailer. Then there was Mary Poppins 1968, I think. You pop that in, you get the official trailer. Then you have something, each of that you have curated. They're usually trailers under 3 minutes. You show, you compare and contrast. And that's, again, key skills. We compare and contrast two texts and we see what's similar, what's different, why, what's the purpose. A director is an author. And the compare and contrasting of two texts, by the way, is a main skill in social studies, as it is in science. So that would be Mary Poppins. Wicked is very rich for The Wiz, which was an African-American urban version stage play with Stephanie Mills, and then the film with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson and others. You can find the posters. And I'm not talking about spending 5 or 10 or 15. I'm talking about punching this into a Google search and you put in the years and you get all of this free, and then you just curate it to show your students. And you generally, I would suggest you only do 2 because it's easier for the students to compare 2 documents, 2 trailers, etc. So we've got trailers, we've got posters of all of that. Sometimes I like to also take an interview or an excerpt of a moment, a scene, or a song from these things. And again, the students are familiar. They own it. Whether the students, somewhere on television, the students have seen A Spoonful of Sugar. If you want to go a little deeper, you take an excerpt from the actual film and then you compare it. You find the PDF. Even if you don't have the book at school, you don't have to go out and buy the whole book. You don't have to order it or spend money or look for it in the library. You can often find a PDF without illustrations of something like Mary Poppins. I've found all kinds of PDFs, something like Fahrenheit 451, if you want to teach that, the opening page of that, take a page, photograph it, show it to the kids, compare that to the opening of the films. And as I say, there's films, there's television series, Goosebumps. I was looking up Goosebumps. I found that there was a series, an animated series. Now David Schwimmer has his new series coming out. None of this requires spending. It goes from 90 seconds to maybe 5 minutes at the most. Just don't overwhelm the students. Start with 1 and 2 things for a simple T-chart of likes and differences.
One of the things you've shown me is that for any given work, there are many, many sources of ancillary materials, but 2 places to check out. So in the case of a Blockbuster film, you can go to the studio and they will have materials online. Sometimes these are materials specifically for teaching, and sometimes they're general that can be easily adapted. And also you can go to the publisher of the book, and they're all about selling more books and involving people in the books they publish by offering free resources. And of course, there are more sources as well. On another note, document, we're going to wrap it up with this fun project-based literacy, and this write-up of an approach. Is that correct? It's a write-up of an approach. is centered around Wicked. So you can teach these books highly effectively, more effectively, likely than with just the print item by enjoying the Blockbuster video that came from the original work. And once you've had these kids learn the book, or while you have them learning the book, there's also the possibility of doing a project. You and I are both big advocates and fans of project-based learning, but I love this introductory statement you made. I'll read in your voice. As we focus on fully engaging students in reading texts, talking about what they read and interpreting correctly the inferences within that text, how better to easily, effortlessly engage readers across the spectrum of reading achievement than with a rigorous literacy project.
Perfect. So the point is, in addition to this, let's say you have the luxury, or your objectives call for you to do, they do a call for you to do projects. And the wonderful thing about doing a project with this is that the kids have already seen demonstrated that there's a real world out there, and a commercial real world, that has studied these texts of the books and stories and has done something that has drawn an audience of millions of people. And now it's their turn to take a look at it. So the kids look at the posters and they see, for instance, that Frank L. Baum and the illustrator, who is Douglas Smith, for the Wicked thing, they both looked at the same content and they wanted to communicate different characters as key protagonists and different themes. And so they came up with different covers and posters, etc. Well, now, student, there is a 2025 Wicked coming out, and there's this whole base there, the miracle, the fan base or whatever of the wonderful Wizard of Oz. What are the characters could we create? What messages do we want as young citizens to put into this thing? What nuances could we do? Let's create our own poster and let's design it. Let's do an exhibit. Let's maybe do a survey online of people coming to our school site. And how about we send it? We send it to Disney. We send it to one of the fan sites. The teacher sends it for Wicked, that's talking about, oh, what's going to be the next movie? What's the next title? We use the poster. We generate the next iterations, and who knows, maybe our iterations can become TV shows, can become videos, can become rap songs, etc., can become the cover, the reissue cover of Wicked when it comes out again. Maybe it can have some student designs. We write to Gregory, who's still alive, McGuire, etc. So it's a project, but now we have a part. We're going forward, and that matches what's really nice is the kids are becoming part of a circle, not only of readers and writers, but a circle of storytellers, of digital project creators, of thinkers. And that is the deepest comprehension of a book.
I think you're talking about something that's out of the box, participatory literacy.
That's inherent in storytelling and reading, is it not?
It's inherent, but you're providing an opportunity and a series of platforms for kids to actually do it,
We're accessing the platform for ESL students who may not be able to write the 5-paragraph essay making the connection between this text and between the real world, and etc., but who can make a wonderful, gripping poster, and then using the poster to peg the communication can express themselves and explain. and you're making a connection for the non-print reading, non-print loving native person born in Brooklyn, New York, who hates books, but can definitely make a great illustration. And yeah, then can explain what they were trying to say, and in pretty good detail.
Yeah, so it's kind of like all sorts of expressive things. You know, you take dance lessons, the teacher shows you a few steps, and then after you've internalized that, you're out on the floor, you're doing your own moves. The art teacher shows you some basic ideas in drawing, and after a while, you develop enough confidence to strike out on your own. And here what you've alluded to, Dr. Rose, is getting kids to feel confident with storytelling and, at least in the beginning, to extend and personalize these stories.
That's about, let's end it this way, or it could be a conclusion. That's what blockbusters do, and that's why they are blockbusters. Ultimately, they resonate in the consciousness and in the souls and emotions and intellectual capacities of people. It resonates with them. There isn't a Moana and the wicked carol. Well, I mean, so there isn't a real thing in the real world that it parallels to, but it brings in an international audience. And why shouldn't our children and their interest in it, why shouldn't we tap that to help them develop the interpretive, expressive, and communicating and creating capacities that they have to join that circle? Why shouldn't we do that? And it's so easy to do.
Yeah, so I want to thank you, Dr. Rose, for sharing the depth and breadth of your experience and your thinking and your brilliance in this area of teaching literacy and more. And I feel like I'm a very lucky professor of education to have you with me. Thanks.
Thank you.